This idea that all these similarities prove a common ancestor. Well, let's pretend that it does, okay? This textbook says humans and orangutans are 96% similar, proving a common ancestor 15 million years ago. I don't think so. Humans and chimps have thousands of differences. Thousands of differences. Overall, this guy says the genetic difference is only 1.6%. Oh, that's what they used to think, but that's a lie. Barney Maddox was the leading genome researcher on this project. He said the genetic difference between human and chimpanzee is at least 1.6%. It doesn't sound like much, but calculated out, that's a gap of 48 million nucleotides. And a change of only 3 nucleotides is fatal to an animal. He said it's not going to happen. That's when they thought the difference was 1.6%. It's still too big of a gap. Now then, later they found out, oh, actually it's a 95% similarity, which is 5% difference. And just recently they said, oh no, wow, look at this, it's 7.7% difference. The more we study about this, the worse the problem gets for the evolutionist. Actually, it's becoming worse by the day. This result is based on only 1 million DNA bases out of 3 billion. They've only analyzed 1/3000th of the human DNA code. Very small percent has actually been analyzed. French and American scientists have mapped chromosome 14, the longest sequence to date, and the site of more than 60 disease genes. The feat enlisted nearly 100 researchers and marks the 4th of the 24 human chromosomes mapped so far. If somebody tells you they have mapped the entire human genome, you tell them Kent Hovind said they're mistaken or they're lying. Okay, they've only mapped a small percentage. Okay, then it says the French National Sequencing Center said the chromosome is comprised of more than 87 million pairs of DNA, all of which have been sequenced, so the chromosome's map includes no gaps. This is the longest piece of contiguous DNA sequenced. 87 million pairs, a fraction of the total 3 billion pairs found in the human genome. They still don't know how much there's in there, and it's already 7.7% difference. This researcher said, human genome is littered with up to 20,000 pseudogenes. That proves evolution. I get this in debates all the time. They'll say, what about the pseudogenes? I said, there's no such thing. They say, well, yeah, there is. There are thousands of pseudo, which means a false gene. It doesn't do anything. Oh, no. Those pseudogenes serve several purposes. Number one, they serve as decoys to draw poisons away from the real ones. Number two, they serve as backup mechanism. It's like your computer has an automatic backup. You know, if a piece of the memory gets destroyed, another one of those pseudogenes jumps right in, takes over. No, there's not. They took out some of the pseudogenes to see what would happen. They said, well, the mouse doesn't need these things. Let's take them out. And there's how they turned out. They were deformed terribly. No such thing as a pseudogene. The pseudogene may function as a decoy to lure away destructive enzymes. Discover Magazine of '03. We could spend all day on DNA sequencing, but, you know, it could be. We have similar DNA to other animals because we have the same designer. You know, similar bridges would have similar blueprints, wouldn't they? Similar cars would have similar instructions on how to build them, how to make them. Man has a pretty good understanding of how cars work. My daddy started us boys off working on cars when we were, 7 years old. I've had 128 cars, I believe. I've rebuilt the motors, the transmissions, the wobbleator shafts, the differentials, the high-speed Canuten valves, and the muffler bearings. I have a pretty good understanding of how cars work. But understanding the operation of a car does not explain the origin of the car. Big difference. See? Let's suppose your son turns 16. All of my kids did a few years ago. Your son comes up and says, hey, Dad, I got my license. Let me see that thing, son. Let me see your license. Come on. Wow, son, that's a lousy picture. It is a good likeness, though. He says, hey, Dad, can I drive the car? Well, son, your mom and I knew this day was coming. The car is a very complicated machine. Did you know there are 3,000 bolts required to hold a car together, and one nut can scatter it all over the highway? We don't think you're ready for the whole car, son. We're going to let you slowly evolve into the car. This year we're going to give you 10%. Next year maybe just a little more. Hey, what good is 10% of a car? That's what you put in a junkyard. How many things have to be right on a car to make it work? Like thousands of things? How many things would have to be wrong to make it stop working? Any one of the many thousands of things. Like not having the keys, not having any gas in it, Take the distributor cap off and run a pencil around the inside and put it back on. Boy, they'll never find that one. Take the spark plug wire off, put a doorbell wire in there, shove it back down, feed the doorbell wire through the firewall, and weave it through the fabric of the front seat. Do that when they're going on their honeymoon, you know. Get in the car. Wow, let's go, honey. Bam! Ooh. Ooh, what was that? Okay. There's 1,000 things that make your car quit running. Probably 10,000 ways to stop a car from running. Shove a potato in the exhaust pipe, you know. Watch what happens. I don't want to give you any more ideas, okay? But there are thousands of differences between humans and chimpanzees. But if you think a percentage of similarity proves a relationship, let me show you the research I've been doing. I discovered clouds are 100% water. Watermelons are 97%. It's only 3% difference. That proves they're related. Jellyfish are 98%. Missing link. And so are snow cones. Yeah, there we go. We got the proof, okay? Then they tell them fossils prove evolution. I say, guys, you got to be kidding. This textbook says, evidence of evolution from the fossil record. Oh, no, don't give me that. That's a lie. There is no fossil record. There's a bunch of bones in the dirt. It's not a record, okay? You're putting your interpretation on those bones they're digging out of the dirt. There is no fossil record. This textbook says evolution is a fact. The fossil record provides some of the strongest evidence that species evolved over time. This is silly. There is no fossil record. You don't look back into time. You look at a bunch of bones you dug out of the dirt. And you put your interpretation on them, okay? Fossils only exist in the present. They don't exist in the past. I mean, you're digging them up and it's 2005, okay? You can't say, wow, this fossil's 40 million years old. You don't know that. Okay? All we do is put our interpretation on the fossils. But the kids are taught fossils contribute to our understanding of evolution. Kids, keep in mind, dead animals do not reproduce or evolve. Darwin said, if my theory is true, numberless intermediate species ought to have be found in the fossil record. Well, I'm sorry. This guy said, since Darwin, many of these links have been found. Oh, they are lying to you. No missing links have been found. Even David Robb, who believes in evolution, says, in the years after Darwin, his advocates hoped to find predictable progressions. In general, these have not been found. Yet the optimism has died hard, and some pure fantasy has crept into textbooks. You're kidding. Fantasy in the textbooks? That's a fancy word for a lie. Okay? And we could spend 2 days on the fossil record. There's no fossil record, and there are gaps all over the place. Every place where there ought to be something, they find nothing. No evidence for how the whale evolved, or how the birds evolved, or how the flowering plants evolved. No evidence whatsoever. If you find a fossil in the dirt, all you know is it died. You couldn't prove it had any kids. And you sure couldn't prove it had different kids. And why would you think a bone in the dirt can do something animals today cannot do? Which is produce something other than their kind. Luther Sunderland wrote to major evolutionists all over and said, hey, where's the evidence for evolution? They wrote back and said, we don't have it, somebody else has it. He wrote to Colin Patterson because Patterson has access to the largest fossil collection in the world. British Museum of Natural History. Nobody's got more fossils than them. Patterson wrote a book about evolution, but he didn't show any missing links. So Sunderland wrote him a letter and said, excuse me, why didn't you show the missing links in your book? I'd like to see a picture of the missing link. Patterson wrote back and said, I fully agree with your comments on the lack of evolutionary transitions in my book. If I knew of any, fossil or living, I would certainly have included them. I will lay it on the line. There is not one such fossil. There are no missing links. The whole chain is missing. It's not a link they're looking for, folks. Even Stephen Gould said the absence of fossil evidence is a nagging problem for evolution. Yeah, it sure is. Stephen Gould died with a set of my videos on his shelf in his library. I hope he watched them. I donated them to him years ago, way before he died. Hopefully he watched them and got saved. I don't know. So Niles Eldridge and Stephen Gould have kind of resurrected the punctuated equilibria idea that came actually from Richard Goldschmidt. Goldschmidt said, the first bird hatched from a reptilian egg. They got so frustrated looking for missing links, they couldn't find any. They said, well, this just proves evolution happened quickly. Oh, I see. Yeah. And this bird that hatched from the reptile egg, excuse me, who did it marry? Don't you have to have two in the same place of the opposite sex? I mean, what if you get two males? Huh? And don't they have to be at the same time in history? What if one's born just 10 years before the other one? Ah, just missed it. You got to get them in the same place of the opposite sex at the same time, and they got to be interested. You got a whole bunch of problems, okay? Serious problems. Then they tell the kids to think critically.